So our first speaker on this part is Professor Ari Trachtenberg, who is Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Boston University. Professor Trachtenberg, he has another role as a member of the Rafik El-Hariri Institute of Computing and Center for Reliable and Information Systems, and in this region, we are familiar with who was it? It's in our neighborhood. During the years, he was also Ari in Red Hat, in TripAdvisor, and MIT. And his research interests include security, distributed systems, and information theory. So it's our pleasure to have you here with us from Boston.
Thank you very much. I'll try to stay on time. I admit I'm not very good at that. Okay, so this is a story about automated exposure notification, but actually it's a post-mortem analysis. So I'll give a little bit of the details about automated exposure notification. This is a nice, huge project with a number of my colleagues, many of them at BU, that's on the left, some of them external on the right, and then a whole group from MIT. And these were a number of students who actually implemented the system. Okay, but in case anyone forgot, let me just remind you, in 2019, September, our antibodies for this new virus, coronavirus, came up in France and Italy, and immediately the initial goal was, how do we contain this? Because we knew that if this R0 value, which is the number of people who catch the disease from a contagious person, is very high, like it is with measles, then a lot of people get it. And so the spread of this virus continues until one of two things happens, either starvation. It's too hard for the virus to find new victims. This is a coupon collector type problem. And you get herd immunity, or you have some sort of sterilizing immunity from a sterilizing vaccine that prevents the disease from spreading. Right off the bat, the public health organizations of the world gave us some guidance. The CDC came up with guidance that said that anyone within 6 feet of someone who is sick for a cumulative 15 minutes over 24 hours, starting 2 days before the illness, should be considered a close contact and might have gotten sick from the person. WHO used 1 meter. European version of the Center for the Disease Control had some slight variations, same house, direct physical contact, within 2 seats on a plane. I don't know how it was in Israel or in any of the countries you're from, but in Boston, we were very, very pedantic about this. Supermarkets had one-way arrows, allowing people to go in one direction. People, we measured 6 feet between seats and made sure that no one sat too close to each other at lectures or in graduation or in funerals or whatever. Okay, so we heard about this, and my initial thought immediately was, wait, I know how to do this. We can use tech to solve this problem. And so I posted, this is actually on LinkedIn, one of the nice, interesting successes of LinkedIn. March 2020, I posted an article saying, hey, I know how we can measure these contacts with cell phones, which everyone has, and Bluetooth, which we can use to measure distance. Okay. So the high-level idea is that, and again, I'm interested in privacy, anonymity, and all that. So the high-level idea was that Joe User would go around broadcasting random tokens, chirps, if you will, just collections of ones and zeros, completely random, to anyone who's willing to hear, all over short-range Bluetooth, okay? And these were rotated regularly. And at the same time, Joe User would also be listening in to other people's chirps, okay? As soon as Joe gets sick, Joe gets tested. If the test is positive, Joe uploads all of his broadcasts, everything he's broadcast in the last 14 days, to a central registry. And now everyone else can check against that registry and say, wait a second, did I hear this random collection of bits? And if I did, then maybe I was next to someone who ended up getting sick. Because, right, the mysterious part of this was that the virus could potentially infect people 2 days before they actually showed symptoms. Okay, so we developed this. For those of you interested in more technical details, the central registry in the sky, we considered a Bloom filter, a huge Bloom filter. We didn't store the actual tokens, we stored hashes of the tokens. This also provides plausible deniability. If someone finds a token that you broadcast on the big Bloom filter in the sky, you can say, well, that wasn't my token, that's just a false positive. If you don't know what Bloom filters are, don't worry about it. This is just for the technical nerds like me. We try to maintain retention time and all that. Okay, when we designed the system, we had several goals in mind. From a system perspective, we wanted the system to be open, right? As a libertarian type of leaning computer science group. And this is something, so I didn't give the whole story. I posted this on LinkedIn, and two of my colleagues, Ron Canetti, who probably you know at Tel Aviv here, and Mayank Varia, both jumped on and said, hey, Ari, let's write a white paper. And so we wrote a white paper based on these premises. Okay, we wanted participation to be voluntary. Anyone could enter or leave the system if they want. The most important part from a security perspective was simplicity. Both the system has to be simple, and it has to be simple for anyone to understand what security it provides. One of the big problems we have in security world is that we come up with these really clever homomorphic encryptions or whatever, and like, yes, we understand that, but no one else does, and so they don't know whether to trust us or not. So this here, the idea was it had to be so simple that anyone could understand it and verify what security elements it provides. It had to be decentralized. We don't trust anyone. We don't want anyone else to have to trust anyone. And it, most importantly, had to be low infrastructure. It had to be something that can be set up immediately on the fly, right? We can't start building antennas and huge systems. From a security perspective, we wanted to have co-location accuracy and reliability so that if it tells you you were within 6 feet of someone, that it's actually were within 6 feet of someone and not, maybe 8 feet or 9 feet or whatever. And we wanted anonymity. We didn't want users to know who else is sick. Now you might say, why do we care about privacy and anonymity? Maybe you don't say that here because you're all in a security venue. But at least from a location perspective, if I know your location, I can know your work time. Again, why do I care? Why does anyone care when your work time is? Well, let's say I'm a thief and I want to steal something from your house, right? It's better to come when you're at work. I know your friends. I know your medical issues, okay? If you spend 3 days out of the last week at a cardiologist, maybe you have heart problems. I know your purchases. I know your political and religious interests. If you're in the vicinity of a big protest for or against, I don't know, whatever controversial things there are in this country, that says something about who you are. And I might be interested in it. I might be interested in selling it to other people. I might be interested in selling it to people who want to get more protesters, whatever. COVID status also, there's a security issue. There was a lot of social shaming with having COVID, at least at the beginning. There's an employment risk and a liability. Okay, if your employer finds out you're sick, you can't come into work. If you come into work anyway and one of your coworkers gets sick, they might blame you for it. So I have here two examples. This is from, I don't remember where, some blog, your guide to shaming idiot people who don't take COVID-19 seriously. There's a real shaming. Whether or not you think this was justified, some people might say, yes, people who do stupid things should be shamed. But there was a clear shaming aspect of it. In Hong Kong, it was even more serious. There was government officials, supposedly according to the diplomat, were trying to unfairly suggest that people with certain dark skin were more likely to get COVID, okay, which is nonsense. But there was this kind of social stigma associated with it. All right, we are interested in a number of security threats from users, from other users. We don't want other users to be able to find out, what tokens you had sent. From the registry itself, we don't trust the registry in the sky. We don't want it to be able to infer who you are. Doctor is basically a lost cause. Your doctor can cause lots of damage if they want to. Right? Just like your pilot, people get very upset about pilots having guns. Your pilot doesn't need a gun to cause a lot of damage. And same thing with the doctor. The doctor who wants to cause damage can cause damage. So we didn't consider the doctors. We were concerned about the world spoofing tokens, rebroadcasting other people's tokens. Let's say I wanted to skip a final. I can just find some sick person's tokens and send it to all of my instructor or my classes or whatever and make sure there's no class that day. Okay, there were interesting technical problems in this as well. One is that Bluetooth, even though it's a well-known standard, different devices transmit at different powers. And that means that it's hard to calibrate Bluetooth power, receive power with distance. Background, Bluetooth cannot receive in the background in iOS for security reasons. And it also causes a huge battery drain. And there's also lots of multipath, so the signal can bounce along many different paths, especially indoors. There are cute questions about linkage. So even though we take this token and we roll it over every so often so you can't track a person based on the sequence of ones and zeros that you hear at various places, the problem is that each Bluetooth transmission also has a MAC address associated with it. Okay? And that address rolls over at a different period from what we were rolling over, which means you can actually link an old MAC address with a chirp, and then a new MAC address is linked to the same chirp, and you can actually produce a chain where you can figure out where everyone is, where the person is. Okay, there were access to system logs, which were an issue. Okay, this is an academic work. We had tons and tons of extensions where philosophical questions like, should I share what I've transmitted, or should I share what I've heard? Should I produce an encounter token where every time I talk to you, we produce some shared information? There were technical questions. How do I calibrate Bluetooth to distance? How do I reduce, how do I keep power low? How do I use other things like receive signal strength indicators or packet loss to try to approximate distance? We spent a lot of time trying to get the distance calibration work. Server access, the registry in the sky gets your IP address when you submit your tokens. How do we make sure there's planned obsolescence? How do you verify physical proximity, re-identification, etc.? Okay, that was the story, that was the research. Now let's get to the meta story, which is really kind of part of the talk. Okay, we put this out on LinkedIn. Ran, Mayank, and I put out a white paper. Some friends at MIT, notably Ron Rivest, saw us and said, hey, why don't you guys join us? We're trying to do something about this. Okay, and so we joined something called PACT, Private Automated Contact Tracing, which is a group of people, which, all listed over there, a number of universities, okay? At the same time, there's also a Swiss group, DP3T, that was putting together something similar. There was another group in California that was putting something together. A number of different groups were coalescing around, let's build this technology, okay? Once that came along, the bigger guns said, hey, wait, we can do this even better. Google and Apple jumped on board and actually incorporated this into their operating system that you have on your phones. A number of other countries, England, Switzerland, whatever, and all these other flags, which I used to remember, but I don't anymore. All had their own systems, but here's the problem. The problem is, even though tens and tens of millions of dollars were spent on this, the results were abysmally bad. We were not really able to produce anything, or within 5%, more than what was being produced through other means. In other words, this really complex system was really beautiful from a technical perspective, but not really useful to protecting against COVID, and we couldn't understand why. And so I hired a biologist to try to look into the literature and understand a little better what's going on. Okay? And here's one hint. This was from a deposition from 3 months ago. Dr. Francis Collins, who was then NIH director, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was then NIAID director, National Institutes of something infectious disease, were both asked in a deposition, and I'll just read it out for you, the first one for Dr. Collins. Do you recall signs or evidence that supported the 6-foot rule? Answer, I do not. Question, have you seen any evidence since then supporting 6 feet? Answer, no. Okay, same thing with Dr. Fauci, at least how was the distance, did you see any studies that support 6 feet? I was not aware of studies that, in fact, would be a very difficult study to do. Okay, so the bottom line was, we had spent huge amounts of time building this really elaborate system and spending, I can't tell you how much time, trying to calibrate Bluetooth to 6 feet. And it was all a complete waste of time because there was no research supporting the 6-foot rule. It was something they had made up based on, this is what we found out when we did the literature survey, based on 100-year data on droplet studies. okay? Back when cameras were in their infancy, this is 1934 work of Wells and Turner, where they showed that droplets from your mouth can travel roughly 2 to 3 feet or 3 to 6 feet in another study. Okay? But both of them acknowledge that droplets less than 0.1 millimeters actually can stay suspended in the air for long periods of time. And we knew by then, early on, that COVID is spread through aerosols as well as droplets. Okay, so in fact, these droplets, these aerosols can stay active for hours, they spread in the air, and really what's important is moving air around. Interestingly, the 15-minute rule, the best we can figure out came out of one anecdote of a corrections officer who visited a prison and got sick. And he visited 22 different people in 17 minutes. And from this, they inferred the 15-minute rule. Because he got sick, clearly 17 minutes was enough to get sick. And I mean, this is just like, if my students did this for a high school, for a project, I'd probably fail them. All right, what else went wrong? Other interesting things. Both us and these other big groups of very well-known academics, we try to publish this in academic literature. We sent to CCS, no. We sent to Usenix, no. We sent to Eurocrypt, no. Okay? Now, these are, like, we all know how to publish. We know what generally gets accepted. None of these groups, not us, not any of the other competing groups, were able to get this published. At the end, we published this in ePrint, and I finally got together, I managed to publish some elements of it in the Journal of Young Investigators, something I'd never heard of before. Okay, so what went wrong? 3 things went wrong. First of all, we relied on authority. CDC and NIH had an excellent reputation, and this whole problem was outside our field, and so we relied on them. But the problem is, this was outside the field of any one person. This is something that required an understanding of fluid mechanics, epidemiology, immunology, a whole bunch of different fields. No one was expert in this. So people were just making us up. Second one, and this is where the fighting disinformation came in. These social media companies, which included Meta, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Reddit, Twitter, etc., all came together and made a pact that they were going to save humanity by restricting information on COVID only to things that came from reliable sources, and that means CDC. Okay? So once that CDC definition came in, no one could question it on social media or in other matters. And this is a big problem. Okay. There was also a healthy amount of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. No one knew how to deal with this novel virus, and so we did the best we could, even doing things like putting poor kids in plexiglass boxes, which actually increased their risk of getting sick, closing outdoor parks and things like that. Okay, so I'm out of my time. So what are the lessons that should be learned, I think? First and foremost, science is a belief in the ignorance of experts. Okay, this was Richard P. Feynman, famous physicist. Okay, ideas must be freely exchanged. Okay, and ultimately reality is what needs to be the guide for what is true, and not social stigma or reputation or any of these things. Okay. Second thing, to steal from one person is plagiarism, to steal from many is research. Okay? One of the reasons we were able to get such a big group, international group involved, was that everyone was concerned about saving people's lives. And so all ideas of credit and ego all went out the window. And no one was concerned about, am I going to get my name on the paper or first author or what have you. And so we got a very big group to work on this, and that was very interesting. Okay, and last and not least, the point I want to hammer here is that academics must exercise independence. They must be independent of politics, they must be independent of money, they must be independent of social pressure, and this must happen especially when there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, and a lot of concern, as there is in the world today and as there was in the world in COVID. And with that, I'm going to end. I have a whole bunch of references. Anyone who wants them is welcome to email me. Thank you.